Let's do a forehand analysis of the smooth-hitting Casper Ruud. Now, the first thing to look at is actually his split step. Now, we cannot see his feet, but we can see his head pop up. So we can zoom in and know when he split steps by when the bounce occurs. So when Gael Monfils is hitting the ball on the other side of the court, Casper is way up in the air. Watch this. Watch how he jumps up to that point, then Gael hits it, and then Casper falls back down, which means when Gael is hitting the ball right there, Casper is actually in the air. He is not touching the ground. That's the proper timing. You want to be off the ground because what it does is it synchronizes your reaction time with when your feet hit the ground. You want to land when you're actually reacting. And since there's a delay in our reaction time, we want to be in the air as our opponent hits. That's the proper timing for a split step. Now, the next thing, let's talk about his grip. He is using a grip that is halfway between a semi-Western and a full Western. And here's how you find that grip. First, put the racket on its edge so that the strings are facing left and right. And you want to put the base knuckle of your index finger and your heel pad on the corner between panels 4 and 5. Let me show you what that means. First off, we are looking at an octagon, right? So there are 8 sides that we're looking at here. 360 degrees divided by 8 is what? How many degrees per panel? 45 degrees. So there's a 45-degree difference between each panel on average. So the very top panel is panel number 1. Just imagine someone sitting on a stop sign. You're driving down the road and you see someone sitting on top of a stop sign. They're sitting on panel 1. And if you're right-handed, you're going to count to the right to count the panels. So here, the top is panel number 1. Ooh, let me redo that. Here's panel number 1, panel 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is the corner between the semi-Western grip and the full Western grip. That is where Casper puts his knuckle and his heel pad. This grip is great for putting a lot of topspin on the ball, but it also isn't as extreme as a full Western, so you're not going to struggle with low balls as much. Next, we can see that when he takes his racket back, he takes it back with both hands. Notice his non-hitting hand is on the throat of the racket, and the tip of his racket's pointing up. He's got his head and the racket head at a similar height. This is called point your strings to the crowd, with the strings facing off to his right from the orientation of, facing Gael Monfils. So he's doing everything correctly here. Absolutely love this turn. You can even see that his hand is around shoulder height, which I am a big fan of. It just helps you to use a high-low, high swing. Now, here is where kind of the magic happens with his forehand. As the racket drops, he does 2 things. Or he does many things. But you can see first, look at his legs. Look how he really sinks down. He sinks down because he's planning on coming up. A lot of people think, you got to stay down when you hit the ball. Well, you might want to tell Casper that because he isn't listening. Notice how his head sinks down because his legs are loading up. His legs are ready to explode. And watch him come up. And as he hits the ball, he's way up above where he started. So he goes down and sinks down and explodes up. That really gets the energy flowing through his body, through his arm, and ultimately into the ball. So get your legs bent, sink down. You can see he's sinking down as the racket's going down. It's a great timing mechanism. You'll learn that from Vic Braden if you study his info. Body drops as the racket drops. Another thing you'll notice is as his racket drops, his strings are pointing down. This is important for getting topspin. Many recreational players, they accidentally have their racket straight up and down with their strings pointing directly off to the side like they could balance a coin on the edge of the racket. You want your strings pointing down. And by the way, the amount they point down is going to be based on the grip that we use. So since he has a pretty severe grip, that's why his strings are very much facing down. If you have more of an Eastern or a semi-Western, your strings will be more like this. They'll be angled typically a little bit less than what we see with Casper. And last, I want to show you how the racket is to the outside of his hand. This is going to allow for a pre-stretch. Right? Vic Braden used to talk about pre-stretch all the time, where you pre-stretch the forearm. Agassi used to do it. Even Sampras would do it a little bit. But you see it's very common with Shapovalov and Kyrgios and Jack Sock and Nadal. You see where the racket drops on the outside of the hand. And then as they move this arm across, and they really start to unwind, that pulls the hand forward. And since he has a loose enough grip that he's not like death gripping the racket, it allows the racket to snap back as the hand is going forward. It's a bit of an involuntary movement where he's just dropping the racket on purpose to the outside of his hand in order to keep the swing really small, but able to handle pace, but also he can create pace himself. You watch a lot of recreational players and they go way back here. He's producing a really small swing, but able to generate a ton of racket speed. Now, I already talked about this, where the benefit of closing the racket face allows the strings to face forward. When he's hitting this ball, his strings are facing Monfils, but his racket is going up as he hits this ball. That is what is going to generate the topspin. So please make sure that your racket face is closed. You can see he's got the butt cap pointing at the ball. That's because he's super loose and allows the racket to lag back. We'll notice his left hand. I'm a big fan of this. I talk about this all the time. Because his left hand moved out of the way, at contact, notice his non-hitting hand is visible over his non-hitting shoulder. This is something that I harp on in my videos all the time. And there's good reason, because you start copying that, you're going to make sure that you are uncoiling and able to turn your hips. If you're struggling turning your hips, it's because you're not moving, most likely, that arm from over to your right, like if you're right-handed, reaching over to your right and then moving it up and across as you hit. It really makes sure that you unwind into the shot. Another thing that I love is notice how high his follow-through is. Look where his hand is. His hand is way up. If I go straight across from his hand, it's way up above his head. You watch a lot of players, recreational players, and they swing very much around their body, and they don't swing up enough. Tennis is a low to high swing. You want to be lifting this ball. There is a net. I want you to notice this. Let me actually, this is perfect. I wasn't planning on even showing you this, but I'm going to cover up the net. I'm going to cover up the net. Notice if I cover up the net, we cannot see the other side of the court. I want to say this again. His vision is looking through the net in order to see the other side of the court. The net is higher than you think. And we tend to look through the net and go, oh, I want to hit it right here. Well, then you got to go up to make it happen. The net is higher than you think. So lift, get that ball to go up by swinging up. It'll partly drag that ball up over the net. And then you can see he goes over the shoulder and then back into the ready position again. So please go out and film yourself. Work on your split step. Work on the grip that you're going to use to really play your best tennis. Work on turning with both hands on the racket and drop the racket down by closing the racket face. If you want to work on the pre-stretch, that's fine. Drop the racket on the outside of the hand. And then as you move this arm across, it allows for the racket to snap behind the hand again. Now, you're not going to be using a ton of wrist, by the way, as you hit. It's just allowing everything to stretch. And like a rubber band, when the racket comes through contact, the racket really tries to catch up. But it's not a lot of wrist. You don't want to think of it as wristiness as you're hitting the ball. You can see I didn't notice this, or not notice it, but I didn't talk about it. Look, notice he's looking at the ball as he's hitting. Absolutely love this. I forgot to mention his legs, pressing up with his legs. The high follow through. He has such a great and smooth forehand. Now, the best way to practice these techniques is at home with a Topspin Pro. You can get a Topspin Pro using my link in the description. I'm also going to pin it in the first comment. I absolutely love the Topspin Pro, and I know you will too. And if you're looking for people in your local area to play matches against or practice with, or if you want to find a coach who's close to you who can help you with your game, use my link in the description and pinned in the first comment, playyourcourt.com/2minute tennis. When you use my link to sign up, you'll get 50% off. So go out and film yourself hitting forehands and review the footage, comparing it to what you've learned in this video. And if you do, there's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. You got this.